over. So I want to thank
It's
Leah
not you,
and
Daniela.
Chiara for this. Yeah, what's happening to my computer? But so the Dante Alighieri Society in Michigan, we obviously promote the Italian culture, but also language. So we have many classes for all ages. We start as young as 3-4 years old up to our oldest, I think, is 87. So we offer classes for Italian that want to learn English, or also obviously English speaker that want to learn Italian. So I invite everyone to visit our website www.dantemichigan.org to see all the classes we have, since now we are online. And we also now have a lot of students from Kentucky, from Ohio. So I love what the outcome of this terrible time is coming out. The positive aspect is that we got to meet other people far. Also, I want to mention further our next events that we'll have planned, also with the Dante in Massachusetts. We have October 4th, Le Favole di Gianni Rodari. And on October 25th, we'll be celebrating the 20th week of the Italian language in the world. And also November 22nd, we have the 5th annual week of the Italian cuisine in the world. And we'll conclude the year with the annual general meeting. All these events are online and free, so I invite everyone to check out our website to get more information. And we are already working on our 2021 calendar. But I think I say too much. I'm very excited for tonight and this wonderful event with Carla Gambescia. So I want to take this time and something else, but thank you, Chiara, thank you, Leah, thank you, Carla.
Benissimo, allora thank you Daniela. Yes, so you know, I as the Dante Alighieri Society of Massachusetts, I don't have to repeat the events because they are exactly the same since we are sharing them, and that is fantastic. So thank you guys. And now io vi presento Carla Gambescia. I would like to say something about her, what she's done. She began her career as a New York advertising executive and then a marketing and new products consultant and market researcher. She had, this I like, she had created and named popular products including the Frappuccino, Sun Chips, and Ciao Bella Gelato. She's an avid traveler and photographer, as we will see, who has explored every region of Italy by foot and by bike, and was the creator of Outside Magazine's best trip in Western Europe, the Giro del Gelato, a bike trip designed to help you become a gelato connoisseur. She was also the owner and culinary director of a top-rated Italian restaurant in Westchester for nearly a decade. Via Avanti was named Best Gelato Shop in New York and was also known for its ongoing program of cultural discovery. Carla is now a lecturer and the author of La Dolce Vita University, an unconventional guide to Italian culture from A to Z, which was awarded the Silver Prize for Best Travel Book of the Year by the North American Travel Journalists Association 2019. She curates postcards from the booth, a very special photo blog, which is like a bi-monthly mini vacation to La Bella Italia. And if you get the emails that we send from the Dante Alighieri of Massachusetts, you might have seen a lot of Carla's blog, because we sent a lot of links to that. And I think you really, really enjoyed them. And now, Carla, vai. Benvenuta a Carla, and I'm gonna mute myself.
Thank you, Chiara, and it's really my pleasure to be here this evening, and I'm excited to share with you what I consider to be my signature lecture. And when I wrote my book, it's not your sort of typical, I bought a villa in Tuscany sort of book. It's different. It's an eclectic collection of mini essays designed to entertain and inform, and to share with you particular things that I found interesting or exciting, surprising about Italy that you wouldn't really find in a guidebook. You know, just anything that would enliven your experience of the Italian culture. And it's organized by letters of the alphabet. And one of the things that I believe, and part of my mission with my lectures and through my book, is to be really an ambassador for culture. And I believe that everyone, regardless of their ethnicity, shares what I consider to be the inner Italian. And the inner Italian is that part of everyone, all of us, that falls in love most easily, is the most expressive, expansive, spontaneous, and most joyful. So what I'm going to do this evening is I'm going to weave together a number of La Dolce Vita University's mini essays in an attempt to tell you a bigger story and to try to explain why Italy casts such a spell on us and the world at large. So what is it about Italy? Italy is a land of dreams and passion and poetry and pleasure. And Italy really has its own special alchemy. And alchemy is that mysterious science of transformation. And indeed, something happens when you arrive in Italy. You get off the plane and you immediately feel lighter. In my case, I start waving my hands around, and I think we all do that. But anyway, Italy engages us on every possible level: the mind, the body, the heart, and the soul. And it's not a new phenomenon. Italy has held a place in the collective imagination of dreamers and travelers alike for hundreds of years, going back to the well-heeled Brits and later wealthy Americans who went on the grand tour. And as it was then, it is now for today's travelers. Italy has it all and then some. It has iconic cities. So England might have London and France might have Paris, but Italy has Rome, Florence, Venice, and Milan. And it has the most amazing scenery. Drama and beauty are everywhere you look, from undulating vineyard-covered hillsides, charming medieval hill towns, 5,000 miles of dramatic coastline, Amalfi, the Cinque Terre, Sicily, Sardinia, and the spiraling Dolomiti in the north. And of course, it has the most fabulous food and wine. Italian is the world's favorite cuisine outside its own borders, and a kaleidoscope of regional cuisines within those borders. And it has phenomenal shop till you drop shopping, and it's loved for its warm, welcoming people. Italy is, or Italians are loved for their operatic expressiveness. And of course, it is the birthplace of opera. I'm sorry, the piano. Here we go. Sorry about that. And not to mention some of the most iconic opera houses and the most awe-inspiring churches in the world. And Italy is paradise found for art lovers. Art is to Italy what oxygen is to the human bloodstream. It's been estimated that Italy is home of over 60% of the world's are treasures. And another metric of this is UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Of the over 170 participating nations, Italy is the world leader, edging out China, that has an even longer history and 32 times the landmass. So Italy is just barely the size of Arizona, but overall and over time, it's exerted an outsized influence on Western civilization and world culture. Italy's long history is one of substance over size. Think of Italy as the little country that could, occupying just 0.2% of the planet's landmass. Italy has had a monumental and everlasting impact on the world. So let's take a quick look at Italy's historic span of influence. My husband just interrupted me and says that I'm not, my slides are not coming up. Is that true, Chiara, or are you seeing a slide that says the age of empire?
I see it. I want to make sure that everybody else is seeing it. Yeah, people say working for me. Yeah, people seeing that they're saying.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. That's great.
So
okay.
You should be able to, I mean, you're sharing now.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay, so I'm sorry to have interrupted this.
No, that's okay, anyway, no problem.
Italy is the little country that could, and one of the most amazing things, and it really only occurred to me after I wrote this book, was that Italy has actually had 3 golden ages, and no other country in the world can boast 3 golden ages. And each golden age was very different from the other, and each responded to very different conditions, and each in turn shaped history and our worldview in very different ways, beginning with the age of empire and beginning with Rome. So I call this the golden age of power and authority. And Rome dominated the Western world for an unprecedented 4 centuries. At its heyday, the Roman Empire sped from modern-day Iraq to Great Britain. Alexander the Great's earlier Greek Empire was about the same size. However, it disintegrated almost immediately after he died. So Rome was a triumph not just of conquest, but also of rule. So how were the Romans able to hold it together? What was the glue? Well, the glue was historic innovations in 2 areas, beginning with engineering. So the Romans were master builders, and engineering provided the physical glue of the empire, the infrastructure, if you will. Now, the Roman legions, they were not just warriors. They were also multitaskers, and they were the Army Corps of Engineers, and they built cities. And this was made possible through breakthroughs in materials engineering with the invention of concrete, which made building easy and cheap, and structural engineering with the invention of the arch, which made building efficient and aesthetically pleasing, and all providing the physical means of connecting the empire with bridges and paved roads. And we all know the expression, all roads lead to Rome. Well, there were 50,000 miles worth. And the legacy of Roman engineering is still with us today, with some of the longest lasting buildings and monuments in the world. And here's the Pantheone from Rome. And this is the best preserved building from antiquity. Here's some more monuments. The arena in Pula in Croatia in the upper right, and Hadrian's Wall separating Great Britain from Scotland, and aqueducts in Segovia in the upper left, and on the lower left is the Pont de Garde in France. And also, well, Roman engineers really had an illustrious relationship with water, and at the height of the empire in Rome alone, there were 1,200 fountains. And here's the Baroque jewel, the Trevi Fountain, which was actually the terminus of Rome's most ancient aqueduct. Now, the second critical and indispensable element or glue that held the empire together was Roman law. And laws, of course, are vital to all stable societies. Think of law as the operating system, which provides the intellectual and emotional glue. And Roman law provided consistent empire-wide statutes based on core principles rather than the whims of local leaders. And these principles were based on promises of citizenship, property rights, and protections under the law. So it really wasn't so bad to be like conquered. And wherever you saw SPQR, the Senate and people of Rome, it was an emblem of the power and authority of the empire that united the largest citizenry that had ever appeared on the planet. So, you know, like engineering and law, it sounds very left brain, but the Romans, they were not all work and no play. And I think you've heard the expression, give them bread and circus. Well, circus was not, you know, the big top and like dancing bears. Circus was games for the citizenry, and it was a big benefit of being part of the empire. And games provided a collective experience, bringing the people together. And Romans could attend public entertainments that were quite spectacular, even by today's standards. And an emperor's popularity was often connected with how lavish his games were. Now, I don't know if you've been to Rome and you go to Circus Maximus and you see it's like this oval, and it's like, why am I looking at this oval? But of course, you have to use your imagination, because Circus Maximus was where the chariot races took place. And in the upper right, you see a depiction of that. And Circus Maximus had a capacity for 150,000. So like a day at the races was quite an event. There was lots of wagering, and there were teams. They were designated by color and favorite riders, favorite horses. And of course, you could go to the Colosseum in the upper right and regularly enjoy more grisly blood sports, even naval battles. And bottom images like Roman elites and moneyed Romans could also indulge in all order of private pastimes. And one of the most things that I just think are so amazing, so surprising, and so unexpected are the well-toned bikini girls from the Villa Casale in Sicily. And it's very interesting. So this is a floor mosaic. Women are in bikinis, and it's an interesting window on women in Roman times. You know, aristocratic women weren't ladies who lunched. They were expected to participate in sport, and this whole bikini thing really proves that, you know, Italians have always been fashion forward. And in the lower right, you see a near perfect mosaic that you can see in the Archaeological Museum in Naples. And these are street musicians that were found. This mosaic was from the Villa of Cecro in Pompeii, which was kind of like the Las Vegas of the empire. And one more thing before I leave the empire is the Blue Grotto. Now, the Blue Grotto is not typically associated with the empire, but in 26 AD, Tiberius, who followed Augustus, moved the administrative capital of the Roman Empire to Capri. And there he built the Villa Jovis, and he chose the Blue Grotto as his personal swimming pool. And in 1964, remnants of statuary of Neptune and Triton and other original ornamentation from Tiberius's time were found. And you can see these in a small museum in Ana Capri. And there's an archaeological project underway to reconstruct the original Roman statuary and bring the grotto back to the way it looked in Tiberius's time. So that's something to look forward to. Anyway, Rome had a great run, coming full circle from its legendary founding with its last emperor, who was named Romulus, and this was in 476 AD. And then much of Italy and the west of Western Europe went quiet for about 900 years And of course, that's a vast oversimplification of Italy, because there was a mini golden age in Sicily. There was the ascendancy of the Venetian Republic. I have a 2-part lecture on Venice. I love Venice, love, love, love it. And the establishment of the universities in the late Middle Ages, including the first university in Bologna. And then Italy's second golden age dawned. So I call this the golden age of imagination and invention. Now, you can call it serendipity, synchronicity, even a miracle. At the dawn of the 15th century, a landlocked city in the middle of the Italian peninsula hosted a rare flowering of genius that's occurred less than half a dozen times in the course of human history. And even more serendipitous, the city's name, Firenze, was derived from the word for flowering or in bloom, and it was to become the epicenter of the rebirth known as the Renaissance, one of the greatest intellectual and cultural transformations in world history, and the period that has most shaped our entire modern view of life. And even more miraculous was that living at the same place at the same time were a plenitude of singular geniuses in the arts and sciences, all living in Florence. So this kind of sounds like a creative Big Bang, but it wasn't really, because there had been preconditions that had been percolating in the late Middle Ages. And there's an expression, follow the money. So let's do that. So by the end of the 1300s, the city of Florence, this of course is the florin, had grown rich in the wool trade and through banking and the invention of the letter of credit and mercantile exchanges that cleverly maneuvered around the church's usury laws. So as a result, Florence was already in bloom financially. And there had emerged a new moneyed merchant class. And there happened to be a family, and one man in particular, who had the skills and the moxie to become the leading political power in Florence and the richest man in all of Europe. Now, this man was Cosimo de' Medici. And it could be argued that Cosimo was perhaps the indispensable genius behind the artistic legacy of the Renaissance. But all of Cosimo's gold florins would have amounted to little if he didn't also possess the intellectual inclination, the taste, the judgment to recognize and to cultivate genius whenever possible. And with Cosimo's support, the wisdom of classical antiquity was brought to light, and all of Plato's dialogues were translated from Greek to Latin, and Cosimo created Europe's first public library in the convent of San Marco, and Cosimo headed the council that selected Brunelleschi, the sculptor turned architect and first engineer of the modern age, to raise the first major dome in Europe in over 1,000 years. And Brunelleschi's dome, now the symbol of Florence, was largely funded by Cosimo. Now, civic pride has always run strong for Italians, and nothing fired it up like the raising of the dome. Brunelleschi's dome soars more than a football field tall and utilized 40 million bricks, and it took 16 years to complete. And all of Florence watched its ascent, circle by circle, di giro in giro, and once completed, it was considered the marvel of its age. And proud Florentines would introduce themselves to foreign visitors, and there were many. And they would say, I am a Florentine of the Cupolone, the big dome. And the Dome of Florence, Brunelleschi's dome, this was the first time an individual architect was associated with a building. Now, Cosimo also supported some of the greatest painters and sculptors of all time, and established a Medici tradition of artistic patronage that would be carried on by his grandsons Lorenzo and great-grandson and grandnephew, who became popes later on. Now, Kenneth Clark wrote in Civilization, and I quote, "The most profound thoughts of the Renaissance were not expressed in words, but in visual imagery. And these images have spoken to us down through the centuries." Artists who created the most recognized images in art history, Botticelli, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, all received help or support from the Medici. And moreover, Cosimo and the Medici set an example that was emulated by the principalities and city-states up and down the Italian peninsula, who began to vie for artists the way they would vie for condottieri, the mercenary military commanders. And as a result, art and culture became the new currency of power and prestige, and ultimately not just in Italy. Before the Renaissance, there was no word for artist, just anonymous craftsmen of the Middle Ages who rarely signed their work or even thought to do so. But during the Renaissance, with the rediscovery and the celebration of the individual and man's limitless capacity for creativity, these singular geniuses became the rock stars of their time. And once again, as in classical Greece, man was seen as the measure of all things. During the course of his lifetime, Cosimo gave away 2/3 of his wealth. And before his death, he rightly declared his greatest legacy would be the art he supported. He later was bestowed the imperial title of Pater Patriae, father of the country, and remains the only individual to receive this title after classical Rome. And you can see this sculpture of Cosimo outside the Uffizi. So the Renaissance revolutionized art, architecture, astronomy, and mathematics, and it radically altered our worldview. We threw off that dreary cloak of medievalism in which human existence was nothing more than a brief and often dark passage to a more glorious afterlife to come, and established that this earthly life, the here and now, was every bit as important with its own rewards and compensations. So in the years that followed, Italy's influence ebbed, and there was a shift away from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and to the New World. But like a phoenix, Italy would rise again 400 years later, and this time from beneath the yoke of fascism and the devastation of World War II, to usher in its third golden age, which I call the golden age of beauty and pleasure. And I actually have a whole presentation just on this. Anyway, one of the reasons that Italy remains so relevant today is the collective belief that Italians, more than any other people, really know how to live life. And in this vein, today's Italy exerts a global influence, but not through the power of the state, but through an idealized state of mind, one that celebrates slowing down, smelling the garlic, one that revels in the senses and celebrates beauty and pleasure and the present moment. And in this process, Italy has once again achieved its own special brand of unassailable supremacy. So let's look at how this golden age developed. In the late 50s and early 60s, Italy reemerged on the world stage through the global medium of film. And here were 4 big international hits. And through these films and others, the world came to know screen legends like Sophia Loren and Gina Lollobrigida, who all served up a sexy, saucy ideal of drop-dead gorgeous women. Now, another common denominator with those 4 movies was one leading man, Marcello Mastroianni, a sexy, endearing, irresistible guy who represented the modern day Latin lover. He's also quite an actor. He made over 140 movies. So with sexy, saucy women, plus an irresistible Latin lover, Italy was well on its way to owning love and romance. Like, look out, Paris. And sexy men and sexy women all drive fast cars. And of course, they wear high velocity fashion. And in the late 70s and early 80s, saw the emergence of new cutting edge designers like Armani and Prada, Versace, Dolce and Gabbana, and with them a shift away from Paris to Milan as the fashion capital of the world. And not just for women, but for men too. And this was because Italian designers were the first to understand women needed clothes for work and men needed clothes for play. And Italian fashion has this amazing broad bandwidth from Armani, who's from the north, you know, which is very Apollonian, his monochromatic, classic, refined look, versus Versace, who was from the south, Dionysian, you know, a riot of color, bold, splashy, expressive, and so southern. And then of course we have food, which this realm of food has become another form of fashion and another global medium where today's Italy reigns supreme. And as with high fashion, Italian cuisine has come to supplant French. Now this book's title says it all, How Italian Food Conquers the World, and it looks at how Italian cuisine came to surpass French, both in popular appeal and critical recognition. And all of this culminated in the 80s, concurrent with Italy's fashion ascendancy. Now, this was the time, if you recall, of the Mediterranean diet and the food pyramid. It was all in vogue. And olive oil was anointed as this like miracle ingredient. And olive oil really, like, this dealt a body blow to French cuisine. And of course, Italian food was far more congruent with more casual lifestyles than fussy, formal French cuisine. And then there was, you know, Nouvelle French. So, you know, what's more appealing, a steaming plate of hot pasta or a fillet of basil leaf, right? So you get it, right? And then, you know, if fashion has a broad bandwidth, Italian cuisine has an uber broad bandwidth. It's really impossible to tire of Italian cuisine. And if someone said to you, you have one cuisine for the rest of your life, what would you choose? Of course, you would choose Italian. And then if you speak to any Italian chef worth their salt about like farm to table, they'll just like look at you like, oh my God, that is not like a new idea. That authentic Italian food has always been that way. Italians have always eaten what is local and what is seasonal. And as Italian cuisine gained its proper recognition and respect, this was all contemporaneous with a complete revolution in Italian winemaking, which resulted in the ascendancy of fine Italian wines, tre bicchieri wines on a par with French wines. So now we had great wines to pair with great food from truly great terroir. And Italy is home to more unique grape varietals than any other country in the world. So gone are the days when the tacky Ruffino bottle gets repurposed with a candlestick. So we have tiny little Italy with not just one or two, but 3 golden ages and a truly monumental impact on the world. But the basic question is still out there. Why? What's the secret behind Italy's special cultural alchemy? And how do Italians keep managing to reinvent themselves? By the way, that's me there. So anyway, when I set out to write my book, my main purpose was just to explore, particular things about Italy that fascinated me, the tiny tesserae within the enormous mosaic. But in the process of writing this, this whole question of why and how behind Italy's ginormous influence began to really intrigue me. And as I researched and wrote more, some patterns began to emerge. And now I have a hypothesis and a possible tentative answer to this very big question. So in the last segment of my remarks, I'm going to share with you my theory. And my theory is that as we each have individual DNA, like 23andMe, I believe that a culture can have its own DNA, and that there's such a thing as Italian cultural DNA. And I've observed a couple of defining qualities of the Italian character, which I consider to be two critical strands of this Italian cultural DNA. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you now. Now, the first strand was defined by, and it's in one of the first essays in my book. It's an essay about a word, a verb that begins with the letter A, an idiom for which there's no English counterpart. And that word is arrangiarsi. And arrangiarsi means the art of working your way through, often through obstacles and making do, even if it's making something out of what seems to be nothing. It's all about skillfully improvising, always being in the moment, and adapting to ever-changing circumstances. It involves putting aside too much premeditation in the favor of acceptance and creative problem solving, occasionally reinforced with political maneuvering and sometimes just ignoring the rules that somebody or some authority is trying to impose. So there isn't a single word in English that encompasses the full meaning of arrangiarsi. It's kind of like making, lemonade out of lemons, but it's much more than that because it involves a combination of instinct and intuition, fearlessness tempered with cleverness, resilience combined with personal resourcefulness. And Italians know it well and have needed it often. And I believe that this strand of DNA, this arrangiarsi, developed because of Italy's geography. And they say, geography is destiny. So looking at a map, we see Italy as this mountainous boot-shaped peninsula at the crossroads of everywhere and everything, the nexus of east and west and north and south, smack in the middle of the Mediterranean. And even the word Mediterranean, its Latin roots, media terra, which means middle of the earth. And I really believe that arrangiarsi came about as a cultural hardwire because Italians have always had to be flexible and nimble to effectively deal with others and trade with all order of foreigners and to manage in states of ambiguity and to manage with conflict and competition, internal and external. And through all of this to survive invaders and oppressors and self-appointed emperors and bombastic dictators. And through all of this, Italians have been able to pivot and change and not just survive, but to prevail on the world stage. So what I'm going to do now is look at a few tesserae that demonstrate this trait of arrangiarsi, each having a dedicated mini essay in my book. So we're going to begin with an example of karmic arrangiarsi. So the essay's title that I talk about this in is Sins of the Father. It's in chapter S. And Sins of the Father is a biblical concept referred to in the books of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And it refers to the sins of one generation being passed on to the next. And this example begins with Reginaldo Scroveni. and he's the father, and he's a wealthy money lender, infamous for his greed and his heartlessness. And he hasn't figured out about the letter of credit yet. Nobody had, because it was only like the late 1200s. But Scrivini was so infamous, Dante named him by name and banished him to the seventh circle of hell, where he was met by burning sand and raining fire. And Reginaldo was further weighed down by a money bag emblazoned with the Scrivini coat of arms, eternally tied around his neck. So enter his son, Enrico, who inherited his ill-gotten fortune by no choice of his own. I mean, he was just born, okay? And he feared that the sins of the father would be visited upon him and doom him to eternal damnation. So what's a son to do? In an act of karmic arrangiarsi, Enrico commissioned a cycle of religious frescoes for his local church by the then famous painter Giotto di Bondone. And the rest, as they say, is art history. The Scrivini Chapel's 40 panels wrap around the chapel walls and culminate in a universal judgment fresco covering an entire wall. And there we find Enrico depicted as himself on the side of the blessed, who Christ has chosen to go to heaven. And Enrico is kneeling and presenting the chapel to the Virgin Mary, who's flanked by two angels. So, was this adequate expiation for his father's sins? Who knows? A milestone in art history? Absolutely. Now, remarkably, the chapter is not yet a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's on a waiting list, and perhaps Enrico's father, Reginaldo, is still waiting too. So I want to now move on to some moral arrangiarsi, and I want to go to Venice. So Venice is that lyrical floating city of shadow and light and mist and magic and masks. And masks are ubiquitous in Venice today, and they've been long a part of Venice's colorful history. And Venice was the wealthiest and most powerful of the maritime republics. And it was also this kind of exotic East meets West Xanadu, teeming with money and foreign traders. And the tradition of masks began with Carnival in the 1200s. And over the course of the next 500 years, masks were worn by many Venetians for months on end, and in the latter days of the Republic, for up to half of the year. Now, masks have always played a part in world cultures, but the wearing of a mask normally is done to transform the wearer, to project an alternative identity. If you think about, theatrical masks. But in Venice, masks were not used to transform identities, but rather to conceal or disguise identities. And they were essential for certain political and social functions. So they were used by inquisitors and their witnesses, and you kind of get that. And then they were also, very interesting, used for public voting events. So you would go and vote and you'd have your mask on, so it was like your private polling booth. And masks were required dress code when going to the casino. Now that makes sense too, because let's say you won a fortune, you don't want everyone to know you're in the money, or if you lost your entire fortune, you don't want everyone to know you're in the money either, or you've lost all your money. But most interestingly, masks were worn for a sort of moral arrangiarsi. So wearing a mask was how Venetians could fraternize with whoever they desired. And wearing a mask, they were able to cleverly maneuver around the very strict class distinctions and religious prescriptions of the time. So when you wear a mask, whoever, whatever, whenever, it's all okay, and there's no compromise to your social or moral status. So ironically, the anonymity of the mask allowed the Venetians they disguised to be themselves in matters from the lascivic to the lascivious. And there was a saying, siamo a Venezia, which means we are in Venice. We're constantly being excommunicated by the Pope, but that doesn't bother us at all. We have great courtesans, you know, as long as nobody's a threat to the Republic or your fellow Venetians, what happens in Venice stays in Venice. So you get the picture. So quite literally, the Venetian masks covered a multitude of sins. And now one more quick example of arrangiarsi in Puglia. I want to visit Puglia for some political arrangiarsi. So these tiny conical-shaped Tolkien-esque homes are known as trulli, and they were erected in the 16th and 17th century. And you could almost expect that Bilbo Baggins, Bilbetto, would emerge and offer you some espresso and biscotti. But in the dry and very hot climate of Puglia, this type of architecture offered many practical advantages. But also, the story goes that this unique architecture enabled the Pugliese to cleverly maneuver around the confiscatory taxes on permanent roof buildings imposed by the Kingdom of Naples, which was ruled by Spain. So to the Italian mind, the very notion of having to pay anything to a foreign interloper was the equivalent of collaborating with the enemy. Therefore, there was both a political and moral imperative to be non-compliant and to resist. And the Trulli were perfecto for this because they're mortarless in their construction and their roofs could be deconstructed by pulling out the single keystone, the ball at the top, the pinnacola. So when the Pugliese learned the taxman was coming, they just pull out the pinnacola, and when the taxman arrives, instead of finding roof buildings to tax, he found a pile of rubble. Now, the area around Alberobello and Luca Rotondo is now designated as UNESCO. If you visit Puglia, you can stay in a Trulli boutique hotel. You can even purchase a Trullo. And it's the same like in Matera, you can go and be in a cave. And all of this is clever arrangiarsi, turning these into wonderful tourist attractions. The second defining strand of Italian cultural DNA that I've observed through writing the book, which I will now ever so briefly describe to you, you've doubtless heard about, and that is la dolce vita, which means the sweet life. And we associate la dolce vita with an indulgent lifestyle and the pleasure principle, but that would really miss its deepest underlying meaning to Italians. So the expression la dolce vita was popularized by Fellini's 1960 international film sensation. But if you've actually watched the movie, it's not a jet set romp in the Eternal City. In fact, it's rather long, like 3 hours, and it's often dark, but it ends with a glimmer of hope. Now, Fellini's original working title offers a far better sense of the term and the movie's fuller meaning to Italians. So the original title or working title was Life is Brutal and Terrible, but you can always find a few wonderful moments of sensuality and sweetness. So perhaps a la dolce vita attitude, one of finding wonderful moments of sensuality and sweetness in a difficult world, is in fact yet another type of arrangiarsi, emotional arrangiarsi. Now, Italy's embrace and celebration of such moments finds expression in many forms, and here are just a couple. So the Italian language itself, and of course, language is always a very powerful window on a culture. And Italian is a beautiful language. It's fun, it's musical, it's bawdy, it's sexy. Everything sounds better in Italian, and why not? It was shaped by the world's greatest poet, Dante Alighieri, and Italian is also a treasure chest overflowing with playful, colorful, visually evocative idioms. And I see this as a powerful cultural manifestation of Italians' unique ability to see, to appreciate, and to celebrate humor and joy in ordinary things. So let's look at some food terms. Okay, so saltimbocca has nothing to do with veal and sage, prosciutto. You know, it's just jump in the mouth because it looks delicious and that's how it tastes. Or strozzapreti, I write about it in the book, priest choker, strangled priest, cafe corretto, coffee or coffee corrected, espresso corrected with grappa, tiramisu, pick me up, lift me up. My favorite is brutti ma buoni, which, you know, I look at these are kind of blobs. They're canned, they're really unattractive, but these are the amazing disappearing cookie. And only Italians would think to call that brutti ma buoni, and puttanesca, and the list can go on. Here's some other examples. If you're a woman, you're flirting with a man, fare la civetta, you're making like an owl. A rabbit is a coniglio. Cane in chiesa, a dog in a church is an unwelcome guest, and makeup is a trick, trucco. So another manifestation of finding joy and pleasure in simple things can be found in Italian theatrical tradition. So Italy may have invented opera, but it's had an even longer theatrical tradition in comedic performance, seen most strongly in Venice's Commedia dell'arte, where it's always a celebration of fun, of silliness, of nonsense, of making light of life and piercing pretense, and above all, being in the moment. And it's characterized by improvisation. And Venice and the Commedia was the birthplace of improvisational theater. And here, the clowns reigned supreme, and they were the true stars. People didn't come for the plot, but they came for the clowns. And they most especially came for the endearingly transgressive Arlecchino, who is a universal symbol of fun and frivolity, and the original physical comic, loved for his gags and physical stunts. And the clowns of the Commedia were collectively known as the Zani. And our word zany is derived from the Zani. So Italy's comedic legacy can be seen in physical comedy today. Well, maybe not the Three Stooges aren't exactly today, but, you know, slapstick, goofy gags like Steve Martin with, you know, the arrow through his head, Gilda Radner throwing herself against a wall, the manic physical activity of the Marx Brothers running all around, the double talk of Sid Caesar, or even Cirque du Soleil's engaging intermezzi. Also interesting that almost all of Shakespeare's comedies are set in Italy, where there's just something in the air, a special lightness of being, and the great bard knew it without ever having to set foot in sunny Italy. So these examples, the Italian language itself and Italy's comedic tradition, reflect a culture that's able to leaven the gravity of life with the levity of life's comic moments, even its existential absurdity. And what philosopher Alan Watts called the sense or purpose of nonsense. And Watts believed that there's value in bippity boppity boo. And so what he means by that is like bippity boppity boo, it's fun to say, okay? So it's like bippity boppity boo. It's like joyful, it's fun to say, like supercalifragilistic. And Watts goes even as far as to suggest that this is ultimately what life is about. And perhaps this is the true spirit of both the movie and the expression La Dolce Vita, finding beauty and wonder and the best of humanity, even in the worst of circumstances. And this very same spirit appeared nearly 40 years later after Fellini's film in Roberto Benigni's poignant film, Life is Beautiful, which was set during World War II. And it's an amazing tribute to love and resilience. And there in the upper right, you can see Benigni doing the Zani turn there. And all of this was even further reflected when Benigni appeared on Oscar night, and his improvised Zani gag when he walked over the audience's seats on his way to the stage to accept his Oscars. And even most especially in his acceptance speech, Benigni quotes a couplet from the poet William Blake. And I quote, "He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." So perhaps this is the true alchemy and enduring appeal of Italy. Not only Italy's resourcefulness and resilience as a culture, but also as a people, Italians' wholehearted and joyful embrace of the present moment, whatever it may hold. So during this time of pandemic, which has been especially heartbreaking for Italians and Italy, where so many have lost their beloved elders, Italians have once again had to reach deep into their reservoir of resilience to find some sweetness, some measure of joy, a sense of hope in a terrible situation. And we all know and understand this well. And of course, Andrea Bocelli gave a truly inspiring Easter Sunday performance to the world. But I think the cultural strands of resilience and joy were most evident among friends and neighbors, where they were serenading each other, you know, balcony to balcony, and all of the beautiful Andro tutto bene signs the Italian school children created that were everywhere. And I believe instinctively that Italians really understand on a truly cellular level what Dante tells us in the Commedia, which is that the singing of the angels is the laughter of the universe. So I kind of get choked up here, but mille grazia. So I hope you enjoy this, and I look forward to taking your questions. Mille grazia.
Grazie, grazie tantissima Carla. Veramente...
Thank you, Carla, for the opportunity.
Sì. No, really wonderful to do a sort of a trip in history, in geography, I would say philosophy, and commedia dell'arte, yes. And theater in general, right? So very nice. So we have some compliments. Carla, wow. Derek Casari says, a vaccination of beauty. Grazie per tutti, grazie a tutti. Okay, and then we have Chares Manganiello, who is asking where to buy your book.
Okay, so you can get it on Amazon. There's a link on my website, which is La Dolce Vita U, but you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and you know, I'm sure that bookstores, if you're supporting an independent bookseller, it's available through, you know, any traditional avenues, booksellers. Also, I Am Books, of course, who supports many of Dante Society's events, and here's my postcard from the boot addressed to. And I have a mug. If you're interested in a La Dolce Vita University summa cum laude mug, just write to me at Carla at La Dolce Vita U. But yeah, but you know what's interesting with the book, I mean, the book are these mini essays. And for me, it was almost, I'm actually working on another book that actually begins to tie these things together. And I have another presentation on Italy's third golden age, which is really where I'm going in the future with this, is what I've really learned as a result of writing this book. Because, you know, as I said, I was just interested in individual things that were fascinating to me, but my own appreciation of the scale and the enormity of Italy's contribution to Western civilization, it's really astonishing. And it just gives me great pleasure to share this with others. And I feel that this is my mission now at this stage in my life.
Yes, thank you, Carla. We have some other notes. Linda says, I enjoyed it, said much, but I would have liked it with better images. Some people couldn't see the images well, but I think that is and please know that I'm not an expert. It might have been that the settings of their screen, of their Zoom was maybe not, sometimes Zoom also needs to do some updating, and they might have an old version, or, I mean, I think that the majority of us saw everything well. So I apologize.
I'm willing, if you would like, I can send you a PDF if you want to share it with participants, so they can have an opportunity to look at it more closely. And, you know, they'll remember the story, and the pictures are beautiful. So why don't I send you a PDF of it, which you can share with anyone who's participated in
yes,
this.
that'd be great.
Chiara, maybe you can share also the recording.
Yes, and I was about to say that.
Participants, yes.
Yeah,
and
I was
yes,
about to say that. I would say that if you guys want me to send a recording, please write to vpculture at dantemas.org. But I cannot send it. I can only send it to you through Google Drive. So if you have Google Drive, I'll put it there, and I can send it to whoever is going to write me there. Otherwise, it's going to be too big of a file. I cannot send it.
Right. Well,
okay, Linda.
And we'll do the PDF too. So for anyone.
Probably, yeah, the PDF too.
Okay.
What else? Yes, okay, Linda, I will send it. The email is vpculture, or you can write me to this one, which is probably easier for me to put it in the Google Drive. That is my theater company, my theater company's email. That is much easier. It's a Gmail, so I can send the Google Drive. Grazie a tutti. Thank you so much. I see Luciana is also here. Luciana Burdi, that is in our board. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Lia. Carla, you were awesome. Bravissima. Grazie.
Veramente. Thank you very much.
Un piacere grande.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Oh, and I want to remind everybody that October 4th, we are going to have a similar event, but with my theater company that is going to read some of the Favole al telefono Gianni Rodari, because it's the 100th anniversary of his birth. And we are celebrating this wonderful author. I remember him as a little child. I don't know about you. Not much in the US. He's not very much read in the US. Okay, so I see. Who is Michael Stein? Is it your editor, Carla?
Yes, yeah. Hi, Michael. Hi.
Yeah, yes. He wrote a lot of
Notes.
excellent, Carla. A lot of compliments.
Oh, thank you. Good to have fan club in
Yes.
watching. Yay.
Okay.
No, thank you, Carla. Thank you, Chiara. Thank you, Daniela. Saluti da Dante, Michigan.
Ciao.
Grazie a tutti, saluti da
Grazie,
Dante,
arrivederci.
Massachusetts. Alla prossima, ci vediamo la prossima volta.
Alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.